If you feel like you're not making any progress and you're kind of stuck in place, it's totally normal. I used to feel like that all the time. But I do have 4 things that I've learned that have helped to turbocharge my business, my work, and my mentality behind it. The first, and in my opinion, the most important step that you can take to turbocharge progress is changing your environment and auditing the environment that you're already in. This is extremely undervalued. I think people talk about this and kind of bring it up, but there's no way that you can overemphasize how important this is. It's like, you know, that friend that keeps saying they're going to stop drinking and does it for a couple weeks, but then you see them posting a bunch of videos at a party on the weekend? Well, why is that? It's not necessarily that they don't have the willpower, right? Sure, if they had more discipline, they might be able to pull it off. But the point is, they're in an environment where that's the norm, where you're expected to do that. And so them trying not to do that is them standing out from everybody else and kind of alienating themselves from the crowd they're in. And eventually, over time, you're going to cave and you're going to begin just doing the same things that you were doing because the environment you're in, the people that you're hanging out with, that's what they do. That's what's normal. Now, my alternative to that, and one that I personally experienced, is imagine that the 5 people that you spend all your time with, you talk with every day, all run their own businesses. Meanwhile, you work a W-2. That was me. Well, if you're talking to these people every day and they're getting excited about the growth in their numbers and hiring new people and what they're learning, and they're all talking about that same thing, and yet I'm still kind of sitting at my job just hanging out, floating by. A natural progression, whether it's a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, it's still going to be a natural progression to move into what they're doing. Why? It's because that's what everybody else is doing. You can see it working. You can see the positives behind it. And so you're naturally going to want to get integrated more into what they're doing so that you fit in more. That's just a natural human reaction and emotion. One of the biggest things that I heard that I can now actually look at and realize is definitely the case is just how people talk. Not just whether they're talking more positively or negatively, but a really big one to let you know if you're with a group of people that's going to be holding you back versus a group of people that's going to be constantly picking you up and pushing you forward is whether people are talking about the past or talking about the present, right? And what I mean by that is, I'm sure everybody can think of that group of people they hang out with where they say, oh, you remember that time back in 7th grade, or you remember, back when we were in college and we were doing this and that, and everybody's kind of laughing about it. And don't mishear what I'm saying. That's a great conversation to have. Like, people enjoy reminiscing on stuff, but when that's all you're talking about, it makes it very clear that you think that the best years of your life are behind you, right? The best times that you're ever going to have already happened. And the alternate to that, the flip side of that, is hanging out with people that are constantly talking about, this is where I'm headed. This is my vision for next year, for 5 years from now. These are my goals, right? They're talking about these things that they're working towards, not these things that have already happened, especially things that you may not be that proud of. So I could probably make like an hour-long video just talking about community, and even in my own life, like if I walked through each and every community that I've been in, the situations that they were, and then you compared that to what I was doing in my life, it's pretty much a one-to-one comparison. So I could talk about it forever, but the point being, if you focus on surrounding yourself with people and recognizing how important that is, it's going to turbocharge your progress. And a lot of people are afraid to do that because they just feel like they've got their best friends and they could never leave them or whatever, but it just depends on what you're valuing. Like, if that's the only thing that matters to you, then sure, you're probably fine just kind of staying where you're at, and that's cool. But if your why, if your reason for wanting to push forward is strong enough, if it's important enough to you, then you're going to realize that, hey, I may need to make some changes and get around people that are going to push me forward faster. Now, the second thing that I've kind of touched on before is getting a mentor. Again, could make a whole video about this, probably will make multiple. But the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to do something you've never done before and you have no idea how to do it, then watching YouTube videos isn't enough. Like, think about if you get in a tough situation, let's say it's your job that you've never experienced before and you have no idea how to figure it out. So you jump on Google and you start trying to Google, what's the best way to go about this? But then some guy comes in that's been doing this for 30 years and says, oh, hey, this is how you do that. And you think to yourself, well, how do you know? Well, they know because they've done it probably hundreds of thousands of times and they have experience. And it's the same thing with a mentor. If you've never bought a house before, then think about how much more helpful it will be if you talk to somebody that's bought 1,000 houses. Don't you think they'll have some pretty valid input? And I think when I talk about something like that, naturally people are kind of nodding their heads and are like, yeah, mentors seem like a good idea. I want a mentor. But what people don't do is pay for them. Now, yeah, you could be lucky and, move in next to some neighbor that is the perfect mentor for you and just wants to share all of their knowledge with you. And that's great. Hopefully you find that. But a lot of times you have to pay for a mentor, and that's kind of a topic that can get a little touchy because there's a lot of people that put stuff out there and try and charge you a bunch of money and don't actually have any value to provide. So you do have to do your due diligence on this, right? You need to figure out who you want to be working with, who you want to be mentored by that's doing exactly what you want to be doing so that you can pay them and learn from them just like you paid for any education. Like for me, like I talk about, Pace Morby is my mentor that I paid for, and I can tell you I paid less money to join this mentorship than a semester of college tuition was, and it's changed my entire life. So not being willing to pay for that is simply lacking perspective. It's not about the money when you recognize how much upside there is. Another huge part of mentorship is just learning from other people's mistakes. Now, this one's tough for me because even though a lot of times I'll hear somebody say, hey, don't do this, you don't really realize that you're doing it, or you're not able to slow yourself down quick enough to avoid it. And so a lot of times I'll see somebody go through something, I'll learn what not to do, and then somehow I still find myself there. So it's not a perfect system. But the point is, the more you can avoid people's mistakes, especially their big ones, right? The big ones are the ones that you can probably recognize and avoid more easily if you have somebody to tell them not to do them. Those are the ones that are going to be life altering. Like if I'm dead set on putting my life savings into an investment and then my mentor comes along and says, hey, 20 years ago, I did the same thing and I lost it all, and here's what happened and how you can avoid the same thing happening. Pretty dang valuable information, I would think. So having a mentor doesn't take out all the mistakes. Mistakes are what make you who you are. They're what are going to teach you the most lessons, the quickest, for sure. But it can eliminate a lot of those downsides while also showing you what it looks like not to make those mistakes so that you have a clear path forward. Next one, I love talking about this one. This is number 3, and it's not having a clear goal. I've talked about this before. I love talking about it, and yet I'm not the best at it, to be totally honest. I just know how valuable it is. The quote I keep throwing out there is fuzzy targets don't get hit. Again, makes perfect sense when you say it, a lot harder to actually apply. Conceptually, if you've ever been to like a gun range or shot a bow and arrow or something and you close one eye and you're trying to aim down the sights, but it's a little fuzzy, your eyelashes are getting in the way or whatever, you can't quite see the target, you're gonna miss. You're gonna be off, for me, usually a lot, right? And that's a fuzzy target. I couldn't quite see where I was going. And that's the analogy that's really easy to understand and hard to implement, because oftentimes I talk to people and they say, man, I've been going at this for 6 months, I've been going at this for a year, and I just haven't gotten where I want to be. And I'm like, well, where do you want to be? And people go, I'm not really sure. It's like, okay, so you're not really failing because you don't actually have a destination in mind. To make progress, we have to be clear on that stuff. You have to be able to take that vision and that goal and work backwards so that you can figure out what is that next best step that's going to get me there. And once you are clear, then you'll stop wasting time on things that don't matter. Like I talk to people all the time that say, I want to buy 100 houses this year. And then they'll say, so I'm going to spend the next year trying to build a team to find houses. And I'm like, dude, you just said you want to buy 100 houses, but you're going to spend the next year building a team to find those houses? Like, that's not getting you closer to the goal that you just told me about. So in their scenario, they're either unclear on their goal or they were super unclear on how to get there. But once you are clear on that goal, you can look at that and say, hey, this is an activity that I'm spending a ton of time on that is not directly affecting my goal. Now, is it a good idea to build a business around something like that? Sure, if that fits into what you're working on. But if it's not the most important thing, then it can't be what you're devoting all of your time to, or even most of your time to. That time needs to be reserved for the most important activity that's going to get you to your goal the quickest, knowing that once you get to your goal, you can then reassess and reevaluate what you're trying to accomplish, and maybe those things have changed. So get a clear goal, work backwards from that goal so that you know what you need to be doing, and then throw out everything else. Now the fourth one, the last one, is golden because everybody has experienced this at some point, and that's the importance of listening to people that have done what you're trying to do, and not just listening to somebody because they're a family member or someone you respect. If your dad tells you not to invest in the stock market, but your parents have never actually invested in the stock market, then what is that decision based off of? Something they saw on TV or something they heard? Wouldn't you rather talk to somebody who's been investing in the stock market for 50 years and can explain the ups and downs and everything in between? I feel like when I see these analogies, it sounds really obvious. Like, yeah, obviously I would listen to that person, but I guarantee you're not doing that in every aspect of your life. Like if somebody tells you it's a really bad idea to quit your job and start your own business, but they've always just worked a W-2 job, especially people that just complain about it, what is that based on? Like, why would you let that person's opinion stop you from doing what you want to do when there's no basis behind it? But again, if someone gives you that same feedback based on their own personal experiences, well, now it might be worth listening to. So I don't think it slows your progress to listen to what other people have to say. I think what slows people's progress is just listening to everybody's opinion of them or everybody's opinion of what they should be doing when it's not based on facts. So real quick, how do you break out of the rut? How do you make that quicker progress and move forward as fast as possible while still building a solid foundation? The first one is your environment. Figure out those people that you're hanging out with. Change who it is until it's people that are talking more about the future, pushing you forward, and helping you to avoid the mistakes from the past. Number two, getting that mentor, right? Find somebody that can teach you, whether you have to pay for them or not, somebody that can teach you that's been there and done that. Get a clear goal. Make sure that you know exactly where you're headed so that you know what's helping get you closer and what's not. And last but not least, just listen to people that have already done it and avoid listening or at least placing so much value on people that haven't. Progress is a slow burner, no matter what you're working on. That's just a fact of life. That's how it's going to be. But you can speed up, you can turbocharge progress by focusing on these things, avoiding the noise and the negative surrounding it. I hope you're able to do that. Good luck.